It was just after midnight when the call came in. The radio cracked alive loud against the silence inside my cruiser. Dispatch said a driver on Route 29 had reported strange lights in the sky, floating over the empty stretch by mile marker 12. At first, I thought it was just another drunk or maybe someone who had been on the road too long. Out here, past midnight, you get a lot of lonely drivers half asleep, letting their eyes play tricks on them. But I didn't have anything else going on, and it was my turn to cover the night shift, so I said I'd check it out. Route 29 was quiet at that hour. I knew every bend in that road, every ditch, every sagging fence line that ran beside it. There were no towns for miles, just pine trees pressing in close and the occasional mailbox, tilting in the dirt like it hadn't been checked in years. My headlights pushed against the dark, carving a tunnel through the fog that hung low that night. I remember thinking the night felt heavier than usual. The kind of silence where even the crickets don't make a sound. My tires hummed against the asphalt, and for a moment, I almost hoped there really were lights out there, because at least then there would be something to break the stillness. I slowed down as I got closer to mile marker 12. I saw the sign catch my headlights. Silver numbers glowing for a second before disappearing again into the dark. That's when I noticed the fog ahead wasn't lying flat anymore. It seemed to be lifting, swirling like smoke. At first, I thought it was my eyes again. But then I saw it. There were lights, not headlights, not taillights, and not stars. 3 white orbs hovering above the tree line. They weren't steady like a tower beacon. They moved. Slow, deliberate, almost like they were breathing. Rising and dipping, drifting closer together, then apart again. I pulled the cruiser onto the shoulder, left the engine idling. I just sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield. My hand was on the radio, but I didn't say anything yet. I didn't even know how I would explain it. The lights weren't far, maybe 100 yards past the ditch. And the strangest thing was, they didn't light up the trees around them. They glowed, but the forest stayed dark. Like they only existed for me. Like the world refused to let them touch anything else. I stepped out of the car. My boots crunched against the gravel, too loud in the silence. The night air was cold, wet, and the fog curled around my legs as I crossed toward the ditch. I kept my hand on the flashlight at my belt, but I didn't pull it free. Somehow it didn't feel right. I didn't want to shine my beam against those things. The air smelled strange, too. Like ozone after lightning, sharp and metallic, even though the sky was clear. I tilted my head back, and for a second I thought I saw stars moving, like the sky itself was shifting. But when I blinked, only those 3 lights remained, hanging still as if they'd been waiting for me. "Sheriff's Department," I called out. My voice cracked against the fog. "If anyone's out there, you need to show yourself." The sound didn't carry the way it should have. It bounced back at me too fast, like the trees were closer than they really were. My skin prickled. I told myself it was just the fog, the damp air swallowing sound. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The lights sank lower, sliding between the trees now. I swear they moved in unison like 3 parts of the same body. I wanted to step back, get in my car, call it in as nothing. But my legs carried me forward, down into the ditch. My boots sank in the mud and the fog seemed thicker there, wrapping around me, pulling me further in. That's when the radio on my shoulder hissed. For a moment, it was just static, but then I heard a voice. Not dispatch, not anyone I knew. It was soft, whispering, broken like it was coming from a mile away. I couldn't make out the words, but it carried a rhythm, almost like someone repeating the same line over and over. I froze, staring at the radio, my hand shaking as I lifted it closer to my ear, and then, clear as day, I heard my name. I nearly dropped it. My name spoken slow in a voice I didn't recognize. That was enough. I stumbled back up the ditch, mud clinging to my boots, and hurried toward the cruiser. But the lights moved too, sweeping closer, dragging through the fog without sound. I didn't hear leaves rustle or branches snap, just silence. By the time I yanked open the driver's door and threw myself inside, the lights were right there, hovering above the road, no more than 20 feet away. My heart slammed against my ribs as I jammed the car into drive. Gravel spit behind the tires, and I tore down Route 29 faster than I should have, not caring if I slid into a ditch. The lights followed. I could see them in the rearview mirror, floating steady, never falling back, never getting closer. Just keeping pace. My hands clenched the wheels so tight they hurt. I didn't dare take my eyes off the road, but every few seconds, I flicked a glance at the mirror. And every time, they were still there. 3 pale eyes watching me run. Finally, after what felt like forever, the fog thinned. The forest broke, and the open fields near town spread out around me. And just like that, the lights were gone. I slowed only when I saw the glow of the gas station up ahead, a lonely island of yellow light in the dark. I pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there in silence, my chest heaving. The parking lot was empty, the place closed for the night, but the light above the pumps hummed steady, real, warm. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and tried to steady my breathing. My radio hissed once, a burst of static, then silence again. I didn't touch it. I don't remember driving back to the station, not really. My hands moved, the car rolled, and somehow I made it. But I couldn't bring myself to write the report the way it happened. I just said there was nothing there when I checked. No one would believe me anyway. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can still see them floating in the dark, waiting just beyond the trees. I wasn't ready to go back out there the next night. Truth is, after what I saw on Route 29, I didn't sleep much. I sat on the edge of my bed with the curtains drawn, drinking bad coffee and staring at the dark between the trees outside my window. I told myself it was nothing, that I was tired, that the fog and the silence had gotten inside my head. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights hovering above me. The next night, just after midnight again, dispatch called. Different report this time. A car sitting out near mile marker 14, engine running, doors wide open. No driver in sight. A passing trucker had pulled over, called it in. Said it looked wrong. I almost told dispatch to send someone else, but that wasn't how the badge worked. It was mine to check. So I grabbed my hat, signed out, and drove back toward the highway I'd sworn I wouldn't touch again so soon. The air was heavy with mist, same as the night before. My headlights cut through it, and for long stretches, it felt like I was driving inside a tunnel of smoke. Every mile closer I got to 14, the tighter my grip got on the wheel. When I finally saw the car, I knew what the trucker meant. It was a sedan, maybe 10 years old, parked on the shoulder at an angle like it had swerved to a stop. The driver's door was hanging wide open. So was the back passenger door. The headlights were on, and the engine hummed low. Exhaust poured from the tailpipe, curling white in the fog. I slowed, pulled up behind it, and killed my siren lights. The red and blue had no business cutting through this kind of quiet. Something about the scene felt staged. Too still, too open. The doors swinging wide like someone wanted me to see. I stepped out of my cruiser, boots crunching on gravel. My hand rested on the butt of my flashlight, but I didn't lift it yet. The car's interior light glowed pale yellow, spilling across the empty road. The inside looked lived in. A purse was dumped on the passenger seat, makeup scattered across the floorboards. A child's car seat was strapped in the back, but it was empty. The straps hung loose like someone had left in a hurry. I called out, "Sheriff's Department, hello?" The sound echoed strange against the fog, bouncing back too sharp. I waited, listening, but nothing answered. No crickets, no frogs. No wind. I edged closer, peering inside. The keys were still in the ignition, humming steady. The dashboard clock glowed 12:47 a.m. On the ground, near the open back door, I saw more things. A spilled sippy cup. A stuffed rabbit lying face down in the gravel, one ear torn. My stomach turned cold. I swept the flashlight across the ditch. No footprints, no movement. Just grass slick with dew. But the air smelled wrong again. Sharp. Metallic like burned wires. I lifted the radio on my shoulder, thumb pressing the button. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got an abandoned vehicle, doors open, engine running, no sign of driver or passengers. I'm going to run the plate," the radio hissed. That was all. Just static. I tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" The hiss grew louder, like a storm of voices buried in the noise. My name surfaced, whispered soft, then gone. My thumb slipped off the button, and I lowered the radio slow, pulse hammering in my throat. The lights of the car flickered, just once. The engine choked, coughed, then steadied again. I told myself it was nothing. Bad battery, old wires, but I didn't believe it. I leaned in, careful not to touch anything, and shined the light across the back seat. More things were scattered there. Fast food wrappers, a coloring book flipped open to a page scribbled in crayon, red crayon pressed so hard the paper had torn. The drawing was strange. Not a house, not a tree, not a stick figure like most kids draw. Just 3 circles, side by side, floating above crooked lines. I froze, staring at it, my breath fogging the glass. 3 circles, like the lights I'd seen the night before. I stepped back quick, scanning the road, the tree line. My flashlight beam caught only fog and empty branches, but I swear I felt something watching. The same way you know when a predator is close even before you see it. The hair on the back of my neck stood stiff. I turned back to the car, trying to keep steady, trying to force myself to think like an officer, not a scared man. If there was a child involved, if someone had been taken, then I needed to check the woods. I needed to at least try. So I called out again, louder this time. "This is the sheriff's department. If you're out there, call back to me." The fog swallowed my words whole. Then, faint from somewhere deep in the dark, I thought I heard it. A sound, a child crying, thin, weak, carried on the mist. I swung the light toward the sound, but there was nothing. Just trees pressed close, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers. The crying came again. Softer this time, drifting further away. Every instinct in me screamed to get back in the cruiser and leave. But I couldn't walk away from the sound of a child. So I stepped toward the ditch, boots sinking in the mud, flashlight beam trembling against the fog. "Hello?" I called. "I'm here to help. Keep calling so I can find you." No answer this time. Just silence. I moved a few yards into the brush, light cutting against the pines, scanning for any sign. My heart pounded and every shadow seemed to move when I looked away. The smell of ozone grew stronger, filling my nose, making me dizzy. That's when the crying came again. Only this time, it wasn't ahead of me. It was behind me. I spun, light flashing across the ditch, across the empty road, back toward the car. The sound had come from there. I knew it. But the car sat just as I'd left it, doors yawning wide, headlights cutting against the fog. The stuffed rabbit was gone. My breath caught. I'd seen it. I knew it had been lying on the gravel, ears bent, face in the dirt. But now the spot was empty. I stumbled backward, beam shaking across the ditch. My hand went for the radio again, desperate, but the static had returned, louder than before, like hundreds of voices whispering on top of each other. I dropped it, the hiss filling the night like insects, and then the engine of the sedan roared. It revved hard, tires jerking, as if someone had slammed their foot on the gas. But no one sat in the driver's seat. The wheel turned on its own, jerking left, then right, as though unseen hands wrestled it. The doors slammed shut all at once, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet. I staggered back toward my cruiser, fumbling for the handle. My flashlight beam shook across the car's windshield, and for just a second I swore I saw faces pressed to the glass. Not one, not two, 3. Round and pale, staring blankly outward. I tore into my cruiser, slammed the door, and threw it in reverse. Gravel sprayed as I turned back toward town, the sedan shrinking in the rear view. Its headlights glared bright, blinding in the fog. Then they winked out, and the road behind me went dark. I didn't look back again. When I got to the station, I wrote the report clean. Abandoned vehicle, checked. Driver not located. That was it. No mention of the crying, or the faces, or the car fighting against its own wheel. But I can't forget the drawing. 3 circles, floating above crooked lines. I see them every time I close my eyes. I didn't want to go back out there. After the abandoned car, I promised myself I'd stay away from Route 29 for a while. But promises don't mean much when you're wearing the badge. A deputy goes where he's told, even if every bone in his body is telling him to run the other way. 2 nights later, dispatch sent me back. Another call. This time, a report from a driver who claimed the fog was too thick to drive through, said there was something moving in it. Those were his words. Not someone, something. I told myself it was just a deer, Or maybe the driver had been drinking, like half the folks we get calls about past midnight. But when I turned the cruiser back onto that same stretch of highway, my stomach turned heavy. The fog was worse than before. My headlights struggled against it. 2 weak beams swallowed almost as soon as they reached the trees. The world felt smaller, like the mist was closing in around me. I flicked on the dash cam, more out of habit than anything else. I'd been running it every shift since the night I first saw the lights. A small part of me hoped that, if something strange happened again, I'd have proof this time. Something I could point at and say, "See? I'm not crazy." The road was empty. No cars, no trucks. Just my cruiser, the hum of the engine, and the fog rolling thick. I tried the radio. Unit 12 on 29. Negative contact so far. Static. It was always static out there. I kept driving, slow, scanning the ditches for any sign of movement. I wanted to see a deer or a bear, or even a person stumbling drunk along the road. Anything that would make sense. But then I saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow in the fog, darker than the rest. It crossed the road ahead of me, slow and deliberate. Not running, not startled. Just moving. I slowed the cruiser, squinting into the mist. The shadow stretched taller as I neared, long limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. I flicked the high beams, and for a split second, I saw it. It wasn't human. It stood too tall. Maybe 8, 9 feet. Its body was thin, stretched like something pulled too far, skin pale against the gray fog. I couldn't see a face, just the outline of a head that seemed too long, like it tapered into nothing. The arms hung low, almost touching the ground, and when it stepped, it didn't bend like a man. My foot hovered over the brake, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed at me not to. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept rolling forward. The figure turned its head, or at least I think it did. The fog swirled, hiding details, but I swear it looked right at me. Then it was gone, just like that. One step into the mist and it vanished, as though the fog had swallowed it whole. I sat there in the cruiser, engine idling, my breath caught in my throat. My hands shook on the wheel. For a long minute, I didn't move. I told myself I'd imagined it. A trick of the light. My headlights hitting fog at the wrong angle. Nothing more. But then I remembered the dash cam. I parked on the shoulder, heart pounding, and rewound the footage on the small display. My fingers fumbled with the buttons, slippery with sweat. When the clip played, I leaned close. The road stretched empty in front of the car, just fog and trees. Then there, movement. The shadow crossed, just like I'd seen it, but it was worse on the camera. On the screen, the thing looked less like a body and more like smoke twisting upright, its limbs bending at impossible angles. It moved slow, almost like it knew it was being watched. And then, as my cruiser rolled closer, the shadow stopped, turned. On the dash cam, it leaned forward, closer to the lens. That wasn't what I'd seen with my eyes. Out there on the road, it had turned its head, maybe glanced my way. But on the camera, it looked straight into it. Straight at me, the screen warped with static. The figure filled the view, a hollow shape with no features. Just a yawning blur of black where a face should have been. Then the feed cut out. The screen froze, hissed and went blank. I slammed the player off, heart hammering so hard it hurt. My mouth went dry, and for a long minute I couldn't breathe right. I wanted to call dispatch, tell them I'd found something, but what could I say? That I'd caught a ghost on camera? That I'd filmed some thing walking through the fog? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd think I'd lost it. I sat there until the windshield fogged from my breath. I stared out at the highway, empty again. Nothing moving but the mist. Finally, I shoved the cruiser into drive and pulled away, slow. My eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The fog curled thick behind me, swallowing the road. And for one terrible second, I thought I saw it again, standing in the middle of the lane, tall and still, watching me leave. I blinked, and it was gone. Back at the station, I pulled the memory card from the dash cam and slid it into my pocket. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sergeant, not dispatch. No one. Later that night, when I was home alone, I loaded the footage onto my laptop. The screen glowed cold in the dark room, the hum of the machine the only sound. I played it again. The figure was there, same as before, crossing the road, stretching tall against the mist. Then it turned, leaning close to the lens, but this time the feed didn't cut out. The figure lingered. It pressed closer until the screen filled with that blank, hollow blur. My speakers hissed with static, loud enough to make me wince. And through the noise, I heard it, a voice, not words. Just a low hum, like something trying to speak but not knowing how. My laptop screen glitched, the image bending, lines tearing across the frame. The hum grew louder, vibrating the desk beneath my arms. I slammed the laptop shut. The hum stopped. I sat in the dark, breathing hard, listening to the blood pound in my ears. The laptop felt hot under my hand, like it had been running for hours instead of minutes. I wanted to throw the memory card away, smash it, anything, but I didn't. Some part of me needed to keep it. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that something was out there on Route 29, moving through the fog, watching. I shoved the card into a drawer, buried under paperwork, and tried to forget it, but I can't. Every time I drive through the mist now, I see it in the corner of my eye. Tall, pale, stretched too far. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at the mirrors, afraid I'll see it standing on the road behind me, closer every time. And at night, when the fog rolls in through town, I swear I hear that hum. Low and steady, vibrating through the walls, like it's waiting for me to listen. I've worked this county long enough to know when a call is different. Most nights it's routine, noise complaints. Drunk drivers, the usual small-town trouble. But sometimes, the tone in a farmer's voice when he calls in tells you everything before you even get there. A tight, strained sound. Like someone trying to keep control, but fear keeps slipping through. That was how it was with the Jacobson place. Old man Jacobson had lived on his land for over 50 years. Tough as nails didn't scare easy. But when dispatch patched me through, his voice cracked. He said something was taking his animals. Not coyotes, not dogs. Something else. "Sheriff," he said, "they don't scream like that unless it's something unnatural. And the barn, it ain't right in there anymore." I tried to pin him down, ask what he meant by unnatural, but he just kept repeating the same thing. Not coyotes, not coyotes. So I drove out. The Jacobson farm sat a good 15 miles from town, at the edge of the pine line where the fields gave up and the forest took over. The gravel drive was long and lonely, lined with sagging fence posts and wire that had rusted half to dust. When I pulled up, Jacobson was waiting on the porch. Lantern in hand, rifle leaning against the rail. His shoulders slumped like the weight of years had finally bent him down, but his eyes were sharp. "They took 3 this week," he said as soon as I stepped out of the cruiser. 2 goats, 1 calf, gone without a sound. "Just blood on the ground come morning," I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "You think it's poachers? Somebody trying to scare you?" He shook his head hard. "No man does what I seen, and no coyote leaves prints like that." He handed me the lantern, motioned for me to follow. His boots crunched over the dirt path that led past the pens, through the damp grass, toward the old barn at the edge of the property. I'd seen that barn before, years back, when we checked licenses during harvest. Just an old wooden thing, weathered gray, leaning a little to the left. But that night, it looked different. Hollow. Like the fog had sunk into the cracks and eaten it from the inside out. We stopped at the pen first. The grass was trampled flat in places, the dirt black with something darker than mud. I leaned close, lantern light swaying, and saw it was blood. Thick patches of it soaked into the earth. But no carcass. No bones. No tracks leading away. I frowned. "You clean anything up?" Jacobson spat in the dirt, voice bitter. "Wouldn't dare touch it. This ain't mine to clean." I wanted to press him on that, but the words dried in my throat. The air smelled wrong again, the same sharp tang I'd noticed out on Route 29. Metallic, almost electric. He led me to the barn. The door groaned when we slid it open, the sound echoing too long in the dark inside. The lantern light spilled across piles of hay, tools hanging from rusted nails, an old ladder leaning crooked against the loft. And silence. I've been in plenty of barns. They always carry sound, mice scuttling in the corners, wood creaking, wind slipping through the slats. But this one was still. Too still. My boots felt heavy as I stepped in. The lantern shook in my hand, shadows crawling across the walls. That's when I noticed it. The boards didn't look right. From a distance, they were just old planks, warped with years of rain. But up close, they seemed to ripple, subtle, almost invisible, like the wood itself was breathing, expanding, contracting, in rhythm with my own chest. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but the feeling stayed. Jacobson wouldn't come in. He stood in the doorway, rifle clutched, shaking his head. "Told you," he muttered. "Barn ain't right anymore." I stepped deeper, the smell of rot growing stronger. The lantern's glow caught something dark in the corner. I angled the light. Blood, splattered high up on the boards, in streaks too far above where a goat or calf could reach. My skin prickled. I moved toward it, boots crunching straw, and the silence pressed harder. My own breathing felt too loud, too sharp. Then, from above, the loft creaked. I jerked the lantern up, light sweeping across the rafters. Empty. Just hay bales stacked tight. No movement. No sign of life. But the sound had been real. A groan, like weight shifting against old wood. "Anyone up there?" I called. My voice cracked. No answer. I swallowed, throat dry, and set the lantern on a beam. My hand went to the ladder. The rungs were slick with damp cold under my palm. Behind me, Jacobson muttered, "Don't." His voice was low, urgent. "Ain't nothing up there you want to see." But I couldn't just walk away. I climbed. Each rung groaned, old nails squealing in their sockets. The lantern glow wavered below, shrinking with each step. My head rose above the loft, and I froze. Hay was scattered everywhere, like something had thrashed through it. Clumps of hair, goat hair maybe, were tangled in the straw. And in the center, a hollow space. Not a nest, not a den, just a void, dug out deep, lined with darkness. The air shifted then, heavy, pressing, like something unseen had moved closer. And I heard it. A sound. Low, guttural, not animal, not human. A groan that seemed to come from the boards themselves, vibrating under my boots. I stumbled back, nearly falling from the ladder. The lantern below flickered, shadows stretching long across the barn walls. The wood pulsed again, subtle, breathing. I hit the ground hard, chest heaving, and grabbed the lantern. "Jacobson, we need to seal this place off." "Burn it if we have to." He just shook his head, eyes wide, rifle shaking in his grip. "Tried that. Doesn't take. This barn don't burn." The air pressed tighter, the groaning rising again, deep in the beams. That was enough. I backed out fast, lantern swinging wild, shadows twitching as if they followed. Once outside, the night air felt lighter, easier to breathe. But even there, at the edge of the field, I could still hear it faint. A pulse, slow, steady, like the barn itself had a heart. I didn't write much in the report. Just animal disturbance, no sign of predator. That's all. But every time I drive past that stretch of land now, I keep my eyes away from the silhouette of that barn. Because when I do glance at it, even for a second, I swear I see it shift, like it's waiting for me to come back inside. I didn't want to go back. Every instinct in me told me to leave that barn alone, to let it rot until it finally caved in on itself. But when you wear the badge, you don't get the luxury of ignoring things, especially when more calls started coming in. It wasn't just Jacobson anymore. Within a week, 2 other farms had reported the same thing. Animals gone, pens torn up, no tracks, no signs of coyotes. Just blood, just silence. And every time, the report circled back to that barn. It wasn't even standing on Jacobson's land originally. Folks around here say the barn's older than the county lines, older than the fences and the houses. Nobody remembers who built it or why it's even out there, just that it's always been. That night, I told myself I was going to take a closer look. Make a full report, something I could write down without feeling like I'd lost my mind. I parked the cruiser at the edge of the dirt road and walked up on foot, lantern in one hand, sidearm at my hip. The air was damp and heavy, the kind of weight you feel in your chest more than your skin. Clouds had rolled in, smothering the moonlight. The barn rose out of the field like a carcass, ribs jutting, skin stretched too thin. Every step closer felt wrong. My boots crunched the soil, but the sound didn't carry. It was like the field swallowed every noise I made. When I reached the door, I set my hand on the wood. It was cold. Not the kind of cold you expect from old lumber at night. Colder. Like touching a stone wall in the middle of winter. I slid the door open. The dark inside was thicker than before. Lantern light only reached a few feet, then bent away like the barn itself refused to be lit. I stepped in, forcing myself to breathe steady. The smell hit me first. Rot. Wet wood. Something sour, almost sweet, like spoiled meat. I told myself it was just animal remains. Maybe something crawled in here and died. But then the boards shifted under my boots. Not sagging, not breaking, shifting, like something inside them was moving. I froze, lantern trembling in my grip. Then I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't clear at first, just the hiss of breath where no one stood. I swung the light across the walls, up the rafters, into the loft. Nothing. Empty. But the whisper came again, closer, right behind the wood. I stepped forward, holding the lantern up. My eyes traced the cracks between the planks. Something glistened deep in there, wet, dark. The whisper crawled into words. Low, dragging syllables I couldn't quite place. Not English, not any language I knew. But the sound carried weight. Like it wasn't meant to be heard by human ears. I felt it inside my skull more than in the air. My knees locked, heart hammering against my ribs. I told myself it was just the wind. Just air moving through the wood. Then the boards bulged. Right in front of me, the wall swelled out, bending inward as if something behind it pressed against the planks. They groaned and flexed, but didn't crack. I stumbled back, breath shallow. The whisper turned into a groan, long, hungry. It shook the nails in the beams, rattled the tools hanging on the wall. Then came the crawling. It started high in the rafters, a scratching, like claws dragging slow against the inside of the boards. It moved down, circling, following the lines of the walls. Wherever it went, the wood shifted, breathing, twitching, like muscle under skin. I wanted to run. My body screamed to turn and bolt for the door, but something kept me frozen. Some weight in the air pressing me down, holding me there. The scratching stopped. Silence, thick and smothering, and then knocks. 3 of them, slow. From inside the wall, inches from my face. I jerked back, lantern nearly slipping from my hand. My breath caught in my throat. The boards where the knocking came from rippled. The cracks widened. And in the split second before I tore my eyes away, I thought I saw something looking out. Not eyes, not exactly. Just the sense of being seen. I backed toward the center of the barn, heart pounding. My boots sank in the straw, but it wasn't soft anymore. It crunched, brittle, like dried bone. That's when I heard the voices. Not one, dozens, all around me. Rising from the walls, seeping through the wood, men, women, children, all whispering in unison, words tumbling over each other. Some begged, some cried, some laughed. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't in the air, they were in me. Pressing against my skull, vibrating in my teeth, I shouted. I don't even remember what. Maybe for them to stop, maybe just nonsense. My own voice sounded small, eaten alive by the chorus. Then, as sudden as it started, it cut off. Silence slammed down again. I lifted my head, gasping for breath. The lantern flame flickered low, shadows stretching long across the warped boards. And in that silence, I heard a single sound. Something crawling. Not on the floor. Not on the loft. Inside the wall. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy. Like something with weight was moving just out of sight. Dragging itself through the beams. The boards bowed where it passed. Groaning under the strain, but they didn't break. Whatever was in there didn't need to come out. It was already everywhere. I staggered to my feet, lantern shaking, and stumbled for the door. My boots slipped in the straw, caught on tools, but I didn't stop. The crawling followed. Right at my side, pacing me through the walls, I slammed against the door, shoved it open, and burst into the night. The cool air hit me like water. The whispering didn't follow, but I swear the barn sighed as I left. a long, slow exhale as if disappointed I'd escaped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the cruiser until dawn, staring at that hollow shape in the field. The way it loomed, silent and waiting. And the worst part? Even out in the open, away from the boards and the whispers, I could still hear it faint. That crawling inside my head, like it had found a way out after all. We got the call just after sundown. Dispatch said a camper hadn't come back to the trailhead, near Dead Man's Creek. His girlfriend phoned it in. She'd gone ahead to the car while he stopped to check something by the water. That was 4 hours earlier. She waited. She called his name. Nothing. I'd been out there before. The creek runs through miles of old-growth forest, pines so tall they choke out the light. Even in daylight, it feels close, damp, like the woods are folding over you. At night, it's worse. Me and Deputy Collins drew the short straw. We loaded flashlights, radios, a first aid kit, and headed out. The drive was quiet. Collins isn't much of a talker, and I was fine with that. The whole time I kept thinking about the name, Dead Man's Creek. Folks around here use it without flinching, but the first time I heard it, I thought it was a joke. It isn't. Old stories say a man drowned there in the early 1900s. Some say it was a logging accident. Others claim it was something darker, a man tied up and thrown into the water, left to sink beneath the black. Nobody agrees on the details. What they do agree on is that people go missing out there, always near the creek. We pulled up at the trailhead around 9. The girlfriend was there, pacing the gravel lot, wrapped in a blanket someone must have given her. She looked strung out, eyes wide, face pale. He said he'd only be a minute, she told us, voice trembling. He just wanted to take one last look. He never came back. We got his name, his age, a description of his clothes. Then we headed down the trail. The path twisted through the trees, the beam of my flashlight barely cutting 20 feet ahead. The air was wet, heavy with moss and the faint rot of leaves. I could hear the creek long before I saw it, just a low, steady rush, like a whisper that never stopped. We reached the water in under half an hour. It wasn't much more than a stream this time of year, winding through a bed of slick stones. But the banks were steep, the mud black and thick. Easy to lose your footing, easy to vanish if you went down wrong. Over here, Collins said. He pointed to the mud near the waterline. Tracks. A single set of boots had pressed deep into the muck. They led right to the edge of the creek. But there were no tracks leading away. I felt my stomach tighten. I swept the flashlight across the water. The surface rippled, catching the light in quick, broken flashes. Too shallow to drown in, I thought. But I'd been wrong before. We followed the bank. The track stayed with us for a while, then disappeared where the mud turned to rock. That's when Collins froze. You hear that? I killed my light, listened. At first, just the rush of the creek. Then, faint, carried through the trees, something else. A voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was strange. Flat, dragging, like someone talking in their sleep. Hello? I called. My voice felt swallowed by the woods. The sound stopped. We stood there a long minute, radios buzzing softly at our belts. Then the voice started again. Louder this time. Closer. We followed it. The trees thickened, branches scraping at our sleeves. The ground turned uneven, roots jutting up like bones. My beam caught flashes of water through the dark, the creek twisting ahead of us. The voice rose and fell, words still garbled. Male. Could have been our missing camper. Could have been someone else. Sir? Collins called. This is the sheriff's department. Stay where you are. No answer. Just that same low murmur slipping back into the sound of the creek. We pushed on. The trail ended at a bend in the water where the bank rose sharp on both sides. A dead tree lay across the stream, its roots jutting into the air like claws, and there, on the far side, was a figure, standing knee-deep in the water. He faced away from us, head tilted down, arms limp at his sides. His clothes matched the description, jeans, flannel shirt, hiking boots. Sir, I called. Relief washed through me, quick and shaky. We've been looking for you. Come on back, let's get you to your car. He didn't move. The water rushed around his legs, cold and black. He stood like he didn't feel it at all. Sir, Collins tried, voice firmer. We need you to step out of the creek. The man lifted his head then, slowly, too slowly. When he turned, my relief died. His face was pale, bloated, like he'd been in the water for days. Eyes open too wide, mouth hanging slack. But we'd gotten the call only a few hours earlier. I stepped forward, boots sinking in the mud. "Sir, are you hurt?" The man opened his mouth wider. And the sound that came out wasn't a cry for help. It was the same dragging murmur we'd heard in the woods. Words without shape, a voice that didn't belong in any throat. The creek surged louder, drowning the edges of the sound. Collins swore under his breath, hand moving to his sidearm. But before either of us could do anything, the man dropped, straight down, into the black water. I lunged forward, light swinging wild, catching only ripples and froth. The water was too shallow for him to sink like that, too shallow for him to vanish. But when the ripples stilled, the creek was empty. No body, no tracks, just water rushing steady, whispering against the stones. We searched until dawn. Up and down the creek, through the brush, every hollow and bend. Nothing. Not a boot, not a shirt, not a scrap of fabric. By sunrise, we had to face it. He was gone. We brought the girlfriend back in. She cried until her voice broke, swearing we were lying, that we hadn't looked hard enough. I wanted to tell her what we'd seen, the pale face in the water, the voice that wasn't his. But I kept it out of the report. Lost camper, presumed drowned. That's all I wrote, but I know what I saw. And every time I close my eyes, I hear that voice again, low, dragging, like the creek itself was speaking. After the night with the boot prints, I tried to convince myself it was just the mud playing tricks, that what we heard circling us was no more than branches snapping under deer hooves or the echo of our own steps bouncing strange through the trees. But I didn't believe it. Not really. The next week, Collins asked me straight out, "You hear it too, don't you?" I knew what he meant without him saying. That sound. Those steps. The way the air changes around Dead Man's Creek, heavy and charged, like it's holding its breath. I nodded, and that was the end of the talk. Neither of us wanted to push it further, but the calls didn't stop. This one came from a pair of fishermen. They'd been camping near the bend where the creek widens, not far from where we saw the missing man. Said they heard someone walking through the brush around 3 in the morning. They yelled, shined lights, nothing. But one of them swore he heard a man calling for help, and when he shouted back, the voice answered. We headed out again, just me and Collins this time. The night was cold, the air wet with mist. Our boots sank into the mud along the trail, flashlights cutting narrow paths through the dark. The creek was louder than usual, swollen from last night's rain. Every step we took felt muffled. My ears rang with the quiet, like the forest was pressing in on itself, waiting. By the time we reached the camp, the fishermen were gone. Couldn't blame them. They'd left their fire cold, embers drowned in the damp. We started sweeping the banks. The mud was torn up with prints, boots, shoes, some fresh, some old. Hard to tell what belonged to the campers and what didn't. That's when Collins stopped. He lifted his head, eyes locked on the tree line. "Did you hear that?" I held my breath, listening. At first only the creek, then, yes, a voice. Faint, carrying through the pines. "Help!" It was so soft I thought my ears were tricking me. But then it came again, clearer. "Help me!" My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. I'd heard it once before, on the night the camper vanished. "Collins," I whispered. "Don't." But he was already moving, flashlight sweeping the brush, boots crunching through wet leaves. "Sir!" he shouted. "We're here! Keep talking to me!" the voice answered. Same words, same tone. "Help me." But it didn't sound right. It was flat, hollow, like the echo of a voice, not the voice itself. Collins didn't slow. "He's alive," he said, half to me, half to himself. "He's out there." I followed, heart pounding, every step deeper into the trees. The beam of my light swung wild, catching nothing but wet bark and shadow. The voice kept calling, always the same 2 words, always the same distance away, like it moved as we moved. "Help me! Help me!" We pushed farther from the creek, the sound drawing us off the trail. The ground rose underfoot, roots twisting, mud giving way to pine needles. And then I noticed something. The voice was coming from the wrong direction. It wasn't leading us deeper into the woods. It was circling us. I froze, light shaking in my hand. Collins, stop. But he wouldn't. His beam cut through the trees, swinging left, right, like he was chasing something just out of reach. His breath came ragged, too loud in the quiet. The voice slipped closer. Help me! I swear it was right behind me that time. I spun, light flashing against the trees. Nothing. Empty woods, dripping with mist, but my chest felt tight. Like someone was standing inches from me, breathing down my neck. Collins! I snapped. My voice cracked. This isn't him! He stopped finally, shoulders heaving. His light caught on my face, blinding me for a second. His expression was pale, drawn, but stubborn. You didn't hear him? He asked. That's his voice. That's the camper. I shook my head. That's not a man. That's not anybody. Before he could argue, the voice rose again. Louder now. Stronger. Help me. But this time it didn't sound like a plea, it sounded like a command. The trees groaned, branches creaking overhead as if they bent toward the sound. The ground seemed to pulse under my boots, faint but steady. And I knew then, it wasn't calling for help, it was calling for us. Collins lifted his radio, hands shaking. We need backup. Send anyone, Static swallowed his words. Not normal static. A crackling, layered with that same voice. Help me. Over and over, spilling through the radio, twisting in pitch, doubling on itself until it was all I could hear. I ripped mine from my belt, but it was the same. Just that hollow cry, cycling, rising, eating the signal alive. We dropped them, both of us breathing hard. Sweat cold on our necks despite the chill. The forest went still. Then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, from every direction at once. Collins raised his light. Mine followed. But the beams only caught trees, fog, and empty space. The voice came again. Not from the trees this time, from the ground, right beneath us. The soil shifted under my boots, pine needles trembling as though something moved below. That broke me. We're leaving, I barked, grabbing Collins' arm. Now. He resisted for half a second, then gave in. We stumbled back toward the creek, running blind through the brush, light swinging wild. The voice chased us, rising louder, filling every gap between the trees. Help me. Always the same words. By the time we reached the water, my legs were shaking, lungs burning. We didn't stop until the lot came into view. Our cruisers waiting like lifelines in the dark. Even then, as I yanked the door open and shoved the key in the ignition, I heard it one last time, clear, close, not from the trees, not from the ground, from inside the car. Help me! I slammed the door, floored the gas, and didn't look back. I never told anyone what I really heard that night. Not the sheriff, not dispatch, not even Collins. Though I know he heard it too. The report just says, unconfirmed voices in the woods. No contact with missing party. But the truth sits heavy on me still, because I know that voice wasn't human. And if it wasn't human, then maybe the camper wasn't missing after all. Maybe he'd become part of something else, and it wanted more. It's strange how silence can be worse than sound. That night, after the voice chased us from the woods, I thought I'd be relieved when it finally stopped. But when it did, when the last faint "help me" fell flat in the air, it was like my ears couldn't adjust. The quiet felt wrong, like something had been cut out of the world and left a hole. We didn't talk much on the drive back. Collins stared out the passenger window, knuckles white against his knees. I don't think he blinked the whole ride. I remember my hands on the wheel, stiff, sweating, holding so tight I could hear the leather creak. The radio was dead, nothing but a thin hiss of static when I tried it. For miles, all we heard was the sound of the tires and our own breathing. I wanted to say something, anything to break it, but my mouth wouldn't work. My thoughts kept circling the same question. If it wasn't the camper's voice, then what was it? And if it was, then what had he become? We got back to the station just after 4 in the morning. The sky was starting to pale at the edges, that thin light before dawn. Normally, that time of day brings a sense of safety, like the worst is behind you. Not this time. The station felt empty, hollow. Even the fluorescents buzzing overhead didn't seem to cut through the dark light. I filled out the report in silence, writing the same careful words. Investigated creek. No contact with subject. Possible wildlife, but my ears wouldn't stop ringing. I swore I could still hear the voice behind the hum of the lights. Help me. Over and over, faint but steady. I went home after sunrise, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw those trees folding in on themselves, the ground shifting under my boots, and that sound. That awful, flat sound like the woods were trying to speak through a human mouth that wasn't there. 3 days passed before the next call. Another report of movement near the creek. Another lost voice carrying across the trees. This time I said no. Told dispatch I was already tied up, couldn't make it. Collins went with another deputy instead. When they came back, they were pale and silent, and I didn't ask. But I knew. They hadn't found him either. After that, the calls slowed. People still whispered about the creek, still swore they heard a man crying out when the fog rolled low, but fewer of them dared to camp there. The stories became background noise, just another piece of local lore that folks half believed but didn't want to test. Except for me, because it didn't stop for me. I'd be sitting in my cruiser at night, parked on some empty county road, windows cracked to the still air, and I'd hear it. Faint, distant, always the same, help me. Sometimes it came from the trees, sometimes from the fields. Once I swear it drifted down from the sky itself, and sometimes, worst of all, it came from inside the car. I'd check the back seat. The floorboards even popped the trunk once, hard hammering, convinced I'd find someone crouched there. But it was always empty. Still, the voice lingered. Collins and I stopped talking about it. He looked worse every week, eyes sunken, skin gray, jumpy at every sound. I knew I looked the same. We were both carrying it, dragging that creek with us wherever we went. I started to wonder if that was the point. Maybe the voice wasn't just a call. Maybe it was a hook. And once you heard it, it stayed in you, like a splinter under the skin, working deeper until you couldn't tell where it ended and you began. One night, months later, I decided to drive back out there. Alone this time. I told myself it was to settle things, to prove it was nothing. That maybe I'd been chasing echoes, nerves, old stories mixing with the wind. But in truth, I think I already knew what I'd find. The lot was empty when I pulled in, gravel crunching under the tires. I cut the engine, sat in the dark, and waited. At first, nothing. Just the creek murmuring beyond the trees, an owl calling once, twice, then silence, and then it came. Help me. So soft I almost thought I imagined it. I didn't move. I just sat there, breathing shallow, staring through the windshield. It came again. Louder. Help me. This time, it wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from the seat beside me. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I'd see. The passenger seat was empty. Just worn cloth and a faint smear of dust in the glow of the dash lights. But the sound was there. Clear as if someone was leaning close to my ear. I don't remember leaving. Don't remember starting the engine or driving back. Just the blur of trees flying past and the voice fading in and out with the hum of the tires. I never went back to Dead Man's Creek after that. Not officially, anyway. The reports still trickled in. Strange lights, footsteps in the mud, voices at night. We'd send rookies or other deputies to check, but they never found much. The missing man was never recovered. His family moved away after a while, tired of waiting for an answer that wouldn't come. But I think about him often. Not the man himself, but the voice. The way it still calls to me even now, years later. When I'm alone in my house and the night is too quiet, I'll hear it slipping between the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, help me. And sometimes, God help me, I feel the urge to answer, to step outside, into the dark, and follow it. That's the part that scares me most. Not that I heard something impossible, not that it followed me home, but that one day I might answer back. And when I do, I don't think I'll come back, because silence isn't safety. Not out there. Silence is only what's left when the woods are listening. I always hated getting called to that stretch of highway. Not because it was dangerous, There wasn't much out there but dirt, scrub, and the occasional truck stop, but because of the way the land felt at night. Empty, hollow like sound didn't travel right. You could stand on the shoulder, yell your lungs out, and it would feel like the darkness just swallowed your voice whole. The motel sat right in the middle of it. A squat little place with faded paint, a half-dead neon sign that buzzed even when it wasn't lit, and just 6 rooms lined up in a row. Locals called it the Six. Folks passing through stayed there when they were too tired to keep driving. Truckers, salesmen, drifters. I got the call around midnight. The clerk said guests were complaining about noise coming from one of the rooms. Screaming, to be exact. She sounded nervous, like she'd been listening to it herself for too long before working up the courage to dial. I pulled in a little after 12:30. The lot was nearly empty. Just 2 beat-up sedans and a semi parked at the far end. The office light glowed pale yellow, sickly against the dark. The clerk, a young woman, met me at the door. She looked spooked. Hair pulled tight, eyes darting to the rooms and back. "It's room 6, she whispered. "They said someone's been screaming for almost an hour. Did you check?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "Key's right here, but I didn't want to." I didn't blame her. Even standing there, I thought I could hear it faintly. A sound just at the edge of hearing. Too high to be wind, too sharp to be anything natural. I took the key, nodded, and walked the row. The rooms looked worse up close. Doors swollen from years of rain, paint peeling, curtains drawn tight. Only room 6 had a light spilling under the frame, pale and flickering like a TV left on. The closer I got, the clearer the sound became. It wasn't just screaming. It was screaming layered with something else. Words maybe, or sobs. Ragged, uneven, like whoever was inside was tearing their throat raw. I knocked. Hard. "Sheriff's office. Open up." The sound stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against me, thick and waiting. I knocked again, louder. "This is the sheriff. You need to open this door." Still nothing. I tried the knob. Locked. I pressed my ear to the wood. At first, nothing. Then soft. Broken. Like breath hitching against a pillow. I pulled back, uneasy. "All right," I muttered. "We're not doing this." I slid the key in, turned, and pushed. The door groaned open. The smell hit me first. Damp, sour, like wet fabric left too long. The room looked wrong. Furniture bolted down like in every roadside motel, but the bedspread was half off, sheets tangled and stained with sweat. The curtains were drawn, though the rod bent in the middle like someone had yanked them too hard. The TV flickered static. No cable, no sound, just light, and the room was empty. "Sheriff's office," I called again, stepping in. "If someone's in here, you need to make yourself known." Nothing. Just the low hiss of static filling the dark. I swept the room. Closet empty. Bathroom empty. Even crouched down to look beneath the bed. Nothing but dust and a forgotten shoe. But the sheets were damp. Still warm. Someone had been there. I felt the back of my neck prickle. I pulled my radio, told dispatch the room was clear, but signs of disturbance. I told them I'd check the logbook, see who was registered to room 6. Before I could step back out, the TV cut to black. No static, no light. Just off. I froze, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The room sank into shadow, darker than it should have been. Then the sound returned, screaming, but not from outside. Not from another room, from right behind me. I spun, hand on my holster, but the room was still empty. The sound cut off again, sharp, like a blade across the air. I stood there breathing hard, listening. Nothing now but my pulse in my ears. I backed out slowly, pulled the door shut, and locked it behind me. The clerk was waiting at the office window, eyes wide. "Well?" she asked. "Room's empty," I told her. "But someone's been in there." "Who's it rented to?" She grabbed the ledger, flipped quick with nervous fingers, stopped, her face drained of color. "It's not rented," she whispered. "No one's in room 6. I stared at her. "Then why was the light on?" She shook her head, clutching the book to her chest like it might protect her. I didn't answer. Didn't know what to say. I just stood there, the echo of that scream still ringing in my ears, knowing the report I'd file wouldn't come close to the truth, because I'd been in that room. and even empty. It hadn't felt empty, not at all. I told myself I wouldn't go back. After that first night, after the screaming and the empty room, I figured I'd done my part. I'd filed the report, I'd checked the locks, and as far as I was concerned, room 6 was the motel's problem, not mine. But the call came again, just 2 nights later. This time, it wasn't just one guest complaining. It was 3. The clerk said the whole building shook with noise around midnight. Screaming, banging, like someone was tearing the walls apart. She didn't even try to hide the panic in her voice when she asked if I'd come. I could have said no. God knows I wanted to. But the way she sounded, like she was holding the phone away from her ear because she couldn't stand to hear it anymore, I couldn't. So I went back. The lot looked the same as before. Empty highway, flickering neon, a couple of trucks parked crooked across the gravel. But as soon as I stepped out of the cruiser, I heard it. A pounding. Steady and hard, rattling the thin walls of the motel. And under it, that same ragged cry, muffled like it was trapped in a box. The clerk was standing outside this time. She didn't come close. Just pointed down the row with a trembling hand. "It's been going for an hour," she said. I nodded and started walking. Even before I reached the door, I could feel it. The sound wasn't just loud, it was physical. The wood in the frame quivered with every hit. The scream behind it rose and fell, high and broken, like someone begging to be let out. I pulled the key the clerk had given me, same as last time. Slid it in, turned. Nothing. The knob didn't budge. I tried again, harder, jiggled it, leaned my weight. The key twisted, the lock clicked, but the door wouldn't open. It felt fused in place like the whole thing had been welded shut. I stepped back, wiped sweat from my palms. "Sheriff's office," I shouted, raising my voice above the pounding. "Open the door!" The sound stopped. Everything went dead quiet. I pressed my ear against the wood, heart hammering. For a moment, nothing. Then scratch, light, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging down the inside of the door. I pulled back fast, breath caught in my throat. The scratching grew louder. Longer strokes now, steady, deliberate carving. I grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at the roadside motel. Room 6. Possible barricade, unknown disturbance. Static." Just static. I tried again. Nothing but the hiss. The scratching went on. I leaned close again, against every bit of common sense I had. My ear hovered inches from the wood, and then clear as anything, a voice whispered from the other side. "Let me out." I stumbled back, nearly dropping the radio. The knob rattled on its own, metal clinking as if someone twisted from the inside. The door shook against the frame, light dust falling from the top. I tried the key again, jamming it in, twisting until my wrist ached. Still nothing. And then the scratching changed. It wasn't fingernails anymore. It was claws, heavy, dragging, tearing into the wood. The sound of it made my teeth hurt. I backed away, hand hovering near my holster, though I had no idea what a gun would do against whatever this was. The pounding started again, shaking the thin wall. The voice rose with it, screaming now, layered, doubling on itself until it didn't sound human anymore. The clerk's scream tore through the night. I spun to see her clutching her ears, backing into the parking lot. That broke me. I grabbed the knob with both hands, threw my shoulder into the door. Nothing. I kicked, wood splintering under my boot. But still it held. And then, silence again. The pounding cut off. The voice cut off. Even the scratching stopped. I froze, chest heaving, ears ringing from the sudden stillness. The air around the door felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. I leaned close one last time. Nothing. Just the faint smell of damp wood and something sour, like mold. And then, softer than before, the whisper came again. "Let me out." I staggered back, heart pounding, staring at the frame. The key slipped from my hand, clattering on the gravel. I didn't pick it up. I told the clerk to lock the office and stay inside. I told her I'd file the report in the morning. I told her to leave room 6 empty until we figured out what was going on. But the truth was, I didn't know if it was empty at all, because I'd heard the voice, and it hadn't sounded trapped. It had sounded hungry. I barely slept the night after the door refused to open, every time. I closed my eyes. I could hear it again. That scratching, that low voice slipping through the cracks like smoke. Let me out. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened, that maybe I'd been tired, strung out, hearing things in the dark. The human mind will do anything to protect itself, even if it has to lie. But then the motel clerk called again. Her voice was flat, like someone talking in shock. She said the noises had stopped around dawn, just cut off all at once. And when she'd gone outside to check, the door to room 6 was wide open. I don't know why, but the words chilled me more than the screaming ever had. I told her not to touch anything, not to go near it. And then, against every instinct telling me to stay away, I drove back out there. The motel looked wrong. Same cracked sign, same gravel lot, but it felt drained somehow, like all the air had been bled out. The morning sun was shining, but it barely reached the row of rooms, and the whole place looked like it was sinking into shadow. The clerk was waiting near the office. She didn't wave, didn't even look at me, just nodded once toward the far end of the row, room 6. The door hung open about 6 inches. Not broken, not splintered, just open. I don't know why, but I walked slow. Each step felt heavy, like I was wading into water. The air grew colder as I got closer. I could hear the buzz of the highway behind me, the hiss of tires on pavement, but it sounded far away, like I was walking into a tunnel. I reached the door. Put my hand on it. It was damp. I pushed it open. At first glance, the room looked empty. Just a standard roadside setup. Thin carpet, faded curtains, a bedspread that might have been red once but was closer to brown now. But then I saw the floor, wet footprints, dozens of them. They weren't scattered either. They covered every inch of carpet, looping in strange circles, overlapping, moving from wall to wall with no clear path. They were bare. No shoes, no socks, just feet, and they weren't right. The shape was off. Too long, too thin, the toes curling into sharp points like claws. My stomach turned as I crouched down. I pressed my fingers into the damp carpet. Cold, not just wet, icy. I straightened and looked at the walls. The wallpaper was peeling, bubbled out in places like something had pressed against it from underneath. A faint smell of rot clung to the air, mixed with something metallic like old coins. I forced myself to speak, though my throat was tight. "Sheriff's office," I said. My voice sounded weak in the stale air. "If anyone's here, make yourself known." Silence. I stepped further inside. The door creaked shut behind me. I froze, listening, heart thudding so loud I swore it echoed. Then, from the corner of the room, a drip, slow, steady. I followed the sound. The footprints led me there, straight into the bathroom. The sink was dry. The tub, empty. But the ceiling above the tub was wet. Dark stains spread across the plaster, dripping in thin streams that pattered into the enamel below. The longer I stared, the stronger the smell became. Damp wood, rust, something sour and rotten. I backed out fast. Pulse racing. That's when I noticed the mirror, above the dresser, cracked and warped from years of neglect. And in it, the footprints didn't look random anymore. From that angle, from where I stood, they formed a pattern, a spiral, tight, coiled, leading straight to the middle of the room. I turned. Nothing there, just more wet carpet. But standing in the center of that spiral, I felt it, like the air itself was watching me. I tried the radio again. "Dispatch, this is..." Static, just like before. My voice felt small. The walls pressed close. The footprints seemed to darken the longer I looked, the wet patches bleeding deeper into the fabric like they were sinking, seeping into the ground itself. And then I heard it. Not the scream this time, not the pounding, just a breath, slow, long, drawn out, like someone exhaling right into my ear. I spun, hand on my gun, but the room was empty. Empty. But not still. The curtains swayed though the window was shut tight. The bed creaked as though someone had just stood up from it. And the smell. God. The smell grew stronger until it coated the back of my throat. Rot, damp earth, like something that had been buried too long was walking free. I stumbled back, hit the wall, eyes darting across the room, and then, faint, low, and broken, the voice came again. "Check out!" It didn't come from the bathroom. It didn't come from the hall. It came from the floor. Deep below me, muffled through layers of wood and rot, that hollow voice crawled up into my ears. Check. Out! I staggered toward the door, boots slapping against the wet carpet. The footprints smeared under me, spreading, stretching, pulling apart like something alive. The knob was slick in my hand, but this time it turned. The door swung wide, sunlight poured in. I stumbled out into the gravel lot, gasping like I'd been drowning. The clerk stood frozen in the office doorway, eyes wide, face pale. She didn't ask what I saw. I didn't tell her. I just told her to close the room. To nail the door shut if she had to. She nodded, but I could see in her eyes she already knew. Knew it didn't matter. Because you can lock a door. You can board it. You can burn the whole damn building down if you want, but footprints don't stop. They follow. And even as I drove away, I swear I could hear it again. That breath. That whisper. Check out. I've worked in law enforcement long enough to know that some calls stick with you. Most of them blur together after a while. Domestic disputes, noise complaints, the occasional drunk fight outside a bar. But every once in a while, something different comes through. Something that feels wrong before you even get to the scene. That's how it was with the woman on County Road 7. The first report came on a Monday night, just after midnight. A truck driver called in, his voice shaking as he told dispatch he'd picked up a woman walking along the shoulder. Said she was barefoot, wearing a white dress that looked soaked straight through. She didn't say much, just asked for a ride into town. He said she looked pale, almost gray, like she'd been caught in the rain for hours. But when he pulled up to the diner to let her out, she was gone. He swore he hadn't stopped before that. He swore she'd been in the passenger seat the whole way. He could still smell the damp fabric of her dress, still see the water on the seat beside him. I heard the call come over the radio while I was on patrol. It didn't sound like anything criminal, more like someone overtired and spooked by their own imagination. But still, I made a note of it. Out here, you learn to take every report with a mix of patience and suspicion. The second call came 2 nights later. This time, it was a young couple driving home from a late movie. They said they saw a woman standing on the roadside, thumb out like she was hitching a ride. The man pulled over, figuring she was in trouble. But the moment she leaned toward the window, the woman in the dress was gone. Just gone, like she'd never been there. The girlfriend swore she saw her reflection in the glass. Pale face, wet hair, dark eyes staring straight in. By then, I knew I'd have to check the stretch of road myself. County Road 7 isn't much. Just 2 lanes cutting through miles of woods and farmland. No streetlights, no houses close by. Just asphalt, ditches, and trees pressing close on both sides. It's the kind of road where your headlights catch things you wish they hadn't. Dead deer, shadows that move wrong, eyes watching from the tree line. I drove it slow that first night. Windows down, radio off. The night was clear, the kind of cold where every sound carries. My tires hummed against the pavement. Crickets buzzed in the ditches. Nothing unusual. But as I rounded a bend near mile marker 12, my stomach tightened. There, in the high beams, stood a figure. She was facing away from me, standing right at the edge of the road. White fabric clung to her body, limp and heavy like it had been drenched, bare feet pale against the dark gravel. Her arms hung loose at her sides, hands slack. I slowed to a crawl, my pulse hammering. "Ma'am?" My voice was louder than I meant. It sounded too sharp in the quiet. She didn't move. Didn't turn. I put the car in park, opened the door. My boots crunched on gravel. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Still nothing. I stepped closer, keeping my hand near my holster. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, like after a storm. "Ma'am?" That's when she turned. Her face was pale, too pale. Eyes dark and wide, mouth parted like she was about to speak, but couldn't find the words. For half a second, I thought she was going to collapse. And then, just as my headlights flickered across her, she vanished. Gone. The ditch beside the road was empty. The trees silent. I froze there, breath caught in my throat. The hair on my arms rose like static. Slowly, I backed up, climbed into the cruiser, and slammed the door. My fingers shook as I fumbled the radio. "Dispatch, this is—" I stopped. What was I supposed to say? That I saw a ghost? That the truck driver and the young couple weren't crazy after all? I took a long breath, forced my voice steady. Checked the area around County Road 7. Negative contact. Might be a prank caller. I'll circle back later. I didn't circle back. Not that night. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The pale face. The wet fabric. The way she didn't walk away or run, just ceased to exist. The next week, the calls kept coming. A farmer heading home late said he saw her in his rearview mirror, sitting in the bed of his truck. A teenager on his way back from a party swore she rode in the passenger seat until he passed mile marker 12, then disappeared. Every single one of them described her the same way. Barefoot, white dress, drenched to the skin, silent. I started digging. Old reports, missing persons, accident records. County Road 7 had seen its share of wrecks over the years. Too many to count. Drunk drivers, deer strikes, one car sliding off the bridge and into the creek below. But there was one case that stood out. 15 years back, a woman named Emily had been driving home late from a wedding. Witnesses said she left alone, still wearing her white dress. Somewhere near mile marker 12, her car drifted off the road and struck a tree. They found her the next morning. She hadn't made it far from the wreck. I saw the old photos in the file. The car crumpled like paper, the dress stained and soaked. When I closed the folder, my hands were trembling. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I've seen enough strange things in this job to know there's plenty we can't explain. But I've always held on to the idea that there's a logical answer, even if we don't see it right away. But I can't forget her face. Pale, wet, eyes dark as the woods behind her. And the worst part? Every driver swore the same thing. When she disappeared, the seat beside them was always wet, as though for a moment she'd really been there. I told myself I wasn't going to pick her up. Not after everything I'd read in those reports. Not after what I saw with my own eyes. But when I saw her again, standing on the shoulder of County Road 7, I slowed down without even realizing it. It was near midnight, maybe later. The sky was low and heavy with clouds, no moon, no stars. Just a darkness that pressed in on the cruiser like a second skin. And there she was, same white dress. Same pale legs bare to the gravel. She looked like she'd been standing there forever, waiting for someone to stop. My headlights rolled over her, and for the briefest second, I thought she looked straight at me. I don't know why I pulled over. Maybe because every report had ended the same way, confused, shaken drivers swearing she'd appeared and vanished without a trace. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was all some trick of the mind. That if I treated her like a real person, she'd stay that way. I eased the cruiser to the side of the road, gravel crunching under the tires. "Ma'am?" My voice wavered, but I forced it steady. "Do you need a ride?" She didn't answer. Just stood there, her arms hanging loose at her sides, hair clinging to her face as though it were wet. Something in my gut screamed to get back in the car and drive. But instead, I opened the passenger door. The dome light flickered on, a pale yellow glow cutting the dark. Her head tilted slightly. Then, without a word, she stepped forward. The gravel made no sound under her feet. She slid into the seat beside me. The smell hit me first, damp earth. Wet fabric like rain-soaked weeds pulled from the ditch. The seat creaked under her weight, and I saw, clear as day, the way the hem of her dress stuck to her legs, dripping water onto the floor mat. I swallowed hard. "Put the car in drive. Where are you headed?" I asked. My voice felt too loud in the quiet. She turned her head slowly, eyes catching in the glow of the dashboard lights. "Town," she said. Her voice was thin, broken, like someone speaking through a wall of water. I nodded, though my hands trembled on the wheel. The road stretched ahead, empty and black. The beams of my headlights reached just far enough to show me the next curve, the next shadow. Every mile felt longer than the last. I tried to keep my eyes on the road, but I couldn't stop glancing at her. She sat so still, hands folded in her lap, head bowed slightly. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her hair clung to her cheeks in wet strands. I wanted to ask more. Where she'd come from, why she was walking alone, if she was hurt. But each time I opened my mouth, the words caught. It felt wrong to break the silence. The radio hissed faintly with static, though I hadn't touched it. The sound rose and fell like breathing. I gripped the wheel tighter. We passed mile marker 10, then 11. The closer we got to town, the heavier the air became. My chest felt tight, like the weight of the whole night was pressing down on me. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "You've been out here a lot, haven't you?" I said softly. "People keep reporting you. They're worried about you." Slowly her head turned. Her eyes met mine, dark, bottomless. "You picked me up," she said. Her lips barely moved, but the words rang clear. "No one ever does," I shivered. My knuckles were white on the wheel. "We'll be in town soon," I muttered. "I'll get you somewhere safe, warm." But when I glanced back again, the seat was empty. I swore under my breath. Jerking the wheel as the cruiser drifted, the seatbelt still hung loose like someone had just unbuckled it. The floor mat was soaked through, water pooling around the edges. The smell of damp earth filled the air. I slammed the brakes, pulling the car onto the shoulder. My pulse thundered in my ears as I threw the gear into park and leaned over. Empty. Just me. But the wet imprint of her body was pressed deep into the seat. I sat there for a long time. Hands shaking, breath ragged. When I finally reached town, the smell was still with me. I left the windows down the whole way back to the station, but it didn't matter. The dispatcher asked if I'd found anything. I told her no. Just another false alarm, but I knew better. She had been there. I'd felt the weight of her beside me, heard the water drip onto the floor, smelled the rot of her dress, and she'd spoken. That's what haunts me most. Not her pale face. Not the way she vanished. Her words. No one ever does. Like she was waiting for me. Like she'd been waiting all along. And I know, deep down, I'll see her again. Because on County Road 7, she never really arrives. She only rides. There are nights when the radio feels like my only company. The cruiser hums along the back roads, headlights sweeping across empty fields, and the static of dispatch fills the silence. A voice checking in, another unit calling out a traffic stop. The familiar rhythm of small-town law enforcement. Most nights it's boring, comforting even. But then there are the other nights. The nights when the radio says something it shouldn't. This happened on one of those nights. It was a Thursday, late in the shift. I'd been driving County Line Road, nothing around but dark fields and the occasional barn, when my radio crackled. At first I thought it was just static, but then I heard it. Clear, steady, unmistakable. Unit 7 to base. Copy? The voice froze me in place. I knew that voice. It was Deputy Mark Ellis, and he's been dead for 12 years. My first instinct was to tell myself I'd misheard. Radios can pick up bleed over from other frequencies. Trucker chatter, ham operators, all sorts of noise. But the more I listened, the more my gut twisted. It wasn't just any voice. It was his. I remember Ellis like it was yesterday. He was older than me, calm under pressure, the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence. I looked up to him in those early years, and I remember the night we lost him. A routine call, shots fired at a farmhouse out near Miller's Creek. He went in first. Didn't make it out. I was still a rookie then. I'll never forget standing there in the dark, hearing the shots, frozen in place while everything went wrong. And now, a dozen years later, his voice was on my radio. Unit 7 to base. Copy? My throat tightened. I grabbed the mic. Base 2, Unit 7. Repeat your traffic. Static. I waited. Breath held. Then, after a long pause, the voice came again. Copy. En route. My stomach dropped. En route where? I checked the display on the radio. The channel was clean, no sign of crosstalk, no indication of interference. Just my frequency. Hours. Ellis? I whispered, though I didn't press the mic. The radio hissed softly, like it was breathing. I drove for miles with my eyes flicking between the dark road and the glowing dash, half expecting that voice to return, and it did. Base. the radio said, louder this time, requesting backup. Shots fired. The words hollowed me out. They were the same ones he'd spoken the night he died. I knew it, because I'd heard them over the radio 12 years ago. And just like that night, my chest went tight. My palms slick on the wheel. I grabbed the mic, hand trembling. Unit 7, say your location. The reply came sharp, immediate. Miller's Creek. The road seemed to vanish under me. I hadn't thought about that place in years, but the name alone was enough to stir something deep. The broken farmhouse, the sound of gunfire, the silence after. I gritted my teeth, heart pounding, and told myself it had to be a prank. Someone was screwing with the frequency, parroting old transmissions. Maybe some kid with a scanner and a dark sense of humor, but there was no laughter, no distortion. Just Ellis's voice, calm and steady like it had always been. Back up, now. I pressed the mic so hard the button bit into my thumb. Unit 7, identify yourself. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. For almost a full minute, the radio hissed, a low crackle that seemed to crawl into the cruiser itself. I kept my eyes on the road, every shadow in the ditch stretching too long, every fence post leaning like a figure. And then, low and close, the voice said one more thing. You left me? I nearly swerved off the road. My chest tightened so bad I could hardly breathe, because I'd been a rookie. I'd frozen. While Ellis went in, I hung back, waiting for someone to tell me what to do. By the time backup arrived, it was too late. Nobody ever said it was my fault, but I've carried it all the same. And now, his voice was dragging it back out of the dark. I killed the radio, twisting the knob hard, but the hiss didn't stop. The glow of the channel display flickered, and even with the power off, the voice bled through. Base, it whispered. Do you copy? I pulled the cruiser over, gravel spraying under the tires, and sat there in the dark, with my heart hammering in my throat. For the first time in years, I prayed. Not out loud, just in my head. When I finally dared turn the radio back on, it was silent. Just dispatch chatter. Normal. But I couldn't shake what I'd heard. Ellis's voice, clear as the day he died, and that last line, you left me. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of memory, that maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, dreamed the whole thing. But when I pulled into the station later that night, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The passenger seat, soaked, dark patches spread across the fabric, damp to the touch, like someone had been sitting there dripping wet. I didn't report it, didn't write it up. I couldn't, because how do you put something like that in a report? Who would believe me? But the truth is, I don't need anyone else to believe it. I know what I heard, and I know he's still out there, on the dead frequency, calling for backup, calling for me. I didn't tell anyone at first, not about hearing Ellis, not about what the radio said, not about the wet seat. I figured if I kept my mouth shut, it would stay between me and the dark. Maybe it was just a fluke, some freak interference that only I picked up. I told myself that over and over. But then dispatch called me the next night. It was close to midnight when my radio lit up with a sharp burst of static. I was parked outside the diner, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, half asleep in the driver's seat. Car 3, copy? I grabbed the mic. Go ahead. The dispatcher on duty that night was Denise. She'd been working the radios longer than I'd been wearing the badge. Reliable, sharp as a tack, not the type to make mistakes. Her voice sounded shaky. Did you just call in? I frowned. Negative. I've been sitting here. There was a pause, long enough that I could hear her breathing through the line. Then who the hell? She whispered, and her words trailed off. My heart started to thump. Denise, what's going on? She cleared her throat, trying to sound professional again, but the tremor was still there. We just logged a call. Male voice said he was Unit 7. He asked for backup at Miller's Creek. My stomach turned. It wasn't just me. You're sure? I asked, but my voice cracked halfway through. I'm sure, she said. Came through the console as clean as any other unit. Strong signal, full call sign. Marked himself as en route. I didn't answer. My hand stayed frozen on the mic, cold sweat running down my back, because I knew exactly what she had heard. The same thing I had. The voice of a man buried 12 years ago. Denise broke the silence. Car 3. Ellis has been gone a long time, hasn't he? The way she said it, it wasn't a question. It was more like she was trying to convince herself of something. Yeah, I said, finally forcing the word out. He has. We didn't talk about it anymore that night. She logged it as a possible cross-frequency bleed and moved on. But the unease in her tone never left my head because now it wasn't just my radio. HQ had heard it too. The next few nights, things got worse. It wasn't always a full call. Sometimes it was just static, twisting itself into shapes that almost sounded like words. Other times, it was Ellis's voice as clear as day. Copy, en route, requesting backup, shots fired, the same fragments, the same echoes. Always those pieces of the night he died. But then one night, Denise patched me directly. Car 3, she said, her voice flat, like she'd already given up pretending this was normal. It's happening again. Do you copy? Before I could respond, the console bled through into my cruiser. The voice filled the cab, rough with static but still recognizable. Car 3. Come in, I froze. It wasn't a broadcast. It wasn't some recycled message. He'd said my call sign, Ellis. I swallowed hard and pressed the mic. Car 3. Identify yourself. There was a long silence. I could hear the static churning, as if the radio itself was thinking. Then, you left me. The same words as before. But now the whole dispatch room had heard them. Denise's voice cut in, panicked. Jesus Christ. Did you hear that? He's not even in the system. He's not... She broke off, fumbling with her console. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and tried to breathe, because I could picture it again, like I was back there. The farmhouse. The gunfire. Ellis going in while I froze on the porch. And now his voice was on every speaker in the county, reminding me of it. After that night, whispers started going around the department. Nobody said it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes. They'd heard it too. Some claimed it was a prank, some kind of sick joke with stolen equipment. But others didn't look so sure. One of the younger deputies, Garcia, asked me straight out if it was true. Did you hear Ellis on the radio? I wanted to lie. I wanted to brush it off, tell him it was nothing. But the words stuck in my throat, because the truth was I had heard it. More than once, and the more I denied it, the louder it seemed to get. By the end of the week, it wasn't just dispatch and me. Other cars were reporting strange chatter, too. Always the same voice, always the same phrases. But then came the night everything shifted. I was patrolling near the edge of town when dispatch called me direct. Car 3, Denise said, her voice tight. Are you at Miller's Creek? My chest clenched. Negative. I'm on Route 9. Why? There was static, and then, through the line, I heard him. I'm at the farmhouse. I need backup. The air went out of me. Denise's voice quivered. He's pinging as your unit, Car 3. It's logging under your call sign. I looked down at the screen on my dash, and sure enough, the signal ID flashing across it was mine. My car, Ellis, was coming through as me. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My throat had locked up. Denise kept talking, her words spilling over themselves. It's clean, I swear. No distortion, no interference. It's pulling your channel ID. How the hell is that possible? The radio hissed, and the voice returned, softer this time, almost gentle. You left me. Don't leave again. I swear I felt the temperature in the cruiser drop. My breath fogged against the windshield, though the heater was blowing, and in that silence, Denise whispered something that made my blood run cold. Car 3. I think he's calling from inside the system. I didn't know what she meant, not really, but the way she said it, the hollow certainty in her voice, made me believe it. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't bring myself to speak. I just drove the empty roads, listening to the radio breathe in my passenger seat. And when the sun came up, I realized something I've been trying to ignore ever since. It's not just that Ellis is speaking on a dead frequency, it's that he's not alone. Because if you listen closely, underneath his voice, there's something else. A murmur, a chorus, like dozens of voices trapped in the static, whispering over each other. And sometimes, I swear they're not just calling for backup, they're calling my name. I used to think the worst sound a deputy could hear was silence. That dead air after you've called for backup, waiting for a voice that doesn't come. But I was wrong. The worst sound is hearing a voice that should be dead. By the time it happened for the third week in a row, most of us had stopped pretending it was interference. No one said it outright, but you could see it in the way the rookies whispered over their shoulders, the way Denise's hands trembled when she worked the console, the way no one wanted the night shift anymore. It wasn't just Ellis's voice anymore, it was the words, that last night. The call came just after 2 in the morning. I was parked at the edge of town, watching the fog slide across the fields. I hadn't touched the radio in hours. My shift had been dead quiet. Then the speaker clicked on by itself. "Car 3!" a voice rasped. I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. Because I knew before he even finished speaking, it was Ellis. "Car 3. Do you copy?" I gripped the mic but didn't answer. Not right away. My hand shook against the wheel and I could hear my own heart in my ears. Finally, I forced the words out. "Identify." There was static. A long drag of white noise like someone pulling in a breath. Then, "It's me, Ellis." The voice wasn't sharp with gunfire this time. It wasn't clipped like an officer under pressure. It was softer, broken. "I don't have much time," he said. "It's coming back." My skin prickled. "What's coming back?" The radio crackled like something scratching inside the speaker. When he spoke again, his words were warped, almost drowned by the static. "The thing from the farmhouse." I stopped breathing. My fingers dug into the mic, because those were the words no one ever said out loud. Not after the reports were filed. Not after the case was boxed up and shoved into archives. The thing from the farmhouse. We'd written it off as a suspect, a shooter, a man with a rifle hiding in the dark. But that's not what I remembered. Not really. What I remembered was the way the air had gone wrong that night. The way the shadows seemed to crawl, like something bigger than a man was pressing against the walls. Ellis had gone in, and I'd stayed behind. And when the gunfire started, I froze. I never told anyone about what I'd felt on that porch. The weight, the presence, like something alive was breathing through the cracks of that old house. And now Ellis was saying it out loud. "It's coming back," he said again, and his voice cracked with something close to fear. "You need to be ready." I pressed the mic, my voice shaking. "Ellis, where are you?" Static roared through the cab so loud it rattled my mirrors. And under it, faint, like an echo deep in a cave, I thought I heard him say, "Behind you." I spun in the seat. The cruiser's back windows were black with fog. Nothing moved. But my skin burned with the certainty that I wasn't alone. When I turned back, the radio was dead silent. Not just quiet, dead. No hiss, no chatter, no heartbeat of the system. Just a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. Then all at once, every unit in the county lit up. Voices spilled through dispatch, frantic. Deputies shouting that they were hearing Ellis, too. Some claimed they heard him from their radios. Others said from the patrol car speakers. One swore he heard him whispering from his own handheld mic with the battery pulled out. Denise came over the main channel, her voice high with panic. "All units, confirm location. He's calling every car." And she wasn't exaggerating. Through the static, I could hear Ellis speaking like he was in 10 places at once, repeating the same words over and over, each time sharper, more desperate. "It's coming back. It's coming back. It's coming back." The voices tangled, overlapping, until it didn't sound like Ellis anymore. It sounded like a crowd. 100 Ellises all shouting at once, and then just as suddenly as it started, the chatter died. One last transmission bled through, not desperate, not panicked, just flat. "Final, car 3, he said, and the weight in his tone made my stomach drop. This time, "Don't run!" The radio clicked off, and I swear to God I heard breathing in the cab. Not mine, not through the speaker. Right there in the empty space beside me, I didn't finish my shift that night. I couldn't. I drove back to the station, sat in the lot with the cruiser engine idling, and stared at the radio like it was alive. No one said a word when I turned in my keys. Not Denise, not the captain, not the deputies who'd all heard the same voice. Because what do you say when the dead call you on a channel no one can trace? When they tell you something's coming back and deep down you know they're right. That was the last time Ellis ever came through the system. But I still carry the radio with me, even off duty. And sometimes late at night, when the world goes quiet, I think I hear the static stir, like someone's trying to reach me, and I know that when the call finally comes again, I won't be ready. The county fairgrounds used to be the heart of summer. I remember it from when I was a kid. Bright lights, the smell of fried dough, music spilling out of cheap speakers, people laughing as they stumbled off the rides. It felt like the whole town gathered there, all in one place. But now, it's nothing but an empty patch of rust and weeds. The rides have been stripped down to their bones. The booths stand hollow with warped wood. And the big arching gate at the front leans so far sideways, it looks like one hard wind could finish it off. That's where I was sent. One night in early fall, the call came in from a trucker who swore he'd seen movement inside. Kids, probably, sneaking through the chain-link fence. Maybe they were drinking, maybe tagging up the walls. That's what the captain said anyway. I told myself the same thing as I drove out. But the closer I got, the less I believed it. Even before I pulled up, I could see the place rising against the skyline, dark silhouettes of the Ferris wheel, the skeletal frame of the coaster. The moonlight hit the metal just right, making it shine in patches like bones sticking out of dirt. When I killed the engine, the silence hit me. Not just quiet, empty. No crickets, no wind, not even the usual hum of the highway behind me. Just stillness. The chain-link fence along the front was bent open near the gate, edges twisted outward like something had pushed from inside. I ran my hand along the brake. Cold steel, edges sharp enough to cut skin. Not kids climbing in. This looked like something breaking out. I told myself I was being dramatic. The gates themselves hung crooked. One was half sunk into the dirt, rust bleeding down its hinges. A sign still clung to the wire. Closed until further notice. The letters were faded, the corners curling. I slipped through the opening, flashlight cutting a narrow path into the dark. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud against the silence. My light swept over empty booths, collapsed tents, piles of debris that looked too much like bodies until you got closer. And then I saw them, tracks in the dirt. At first, I thought they were shoe prints, but the more I followed, the less sense they made. Some looked like boots, others bare feet, the sizes never the same. They overlapped in strange patterns, circling back on themselves, like a crowd had wandered through without any real destination. Only, there hadn't been a crowd here in years. The tracks led deeper inside, toward the rides. The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its cars dangling at crooked angles, one of them torn clean off and lying in the dirt below. The air smelled faintly of rust and something else. Damp, like earth turned over after rain. That's when I heard it. A laugh. It was faint, echoing across the empty grounds. High-pitched, quick, like a child's. I froze, scanning the shadows. My light swept over the ticket booth, the food stalls, the cracked pavement. Nothing. The laugh came again, closer this time. I called out. "Sheriff's office! Who's out there?" No answer. Just the creak of metal overhead. The Ferris wheel shifting slightly in the breeze that hadn't been there before. I pressed on, deeper into the midway. My radio hissed with static, sharp enough to make me flinch. I lifted it to my mouth. "Dispatch. I've got signs of trespassers. Possible juveniles. Send back up!" But the line was nothing but white noise. I lowered the mic slowly, keeping my eyes on the shadows. The footprints spread out everywhere now, weaving between rides and booths. Some trailed off toward the funhouse, others bled into the grass by the animal pens. My light caught the faded lettering on the funhouse entrance. Mirror maze. The doors hung half open, mirrors inside catching glints of moonlight like eyes. I didn't go in. Not then. Instead, I kept moving toward the game stalls. The plywood counters were warped, paint peeling. A row of stuffed animals still hung from hooks, their fur rotted. Faces sun-bleached until their smiles looked grotesque. That's when I saw movement. Down past the shooting gallery, a shadow darted between two stalls. Quick, human-shaped. "Hey!" I shouted, breaking into a run. "Sheriff's office!" But when I rounded the corner, there was nothing. just more silence. My light caught the wall of the stall, and there, scratched into the wood, were words. "Let us in." The letters were uneven, jagged, carved deep like someone had used a knife or something sharper. I stepped back, pulse racing. My beam swept over the dirt again. New tracks, fresher than the rest, pressed deep into the ground. Bare feet, long, thin toes. Too long. The air felt colder now, heavy. And then, from somewhere behind the Ferris wheel, I heard the laughter again. Not one child this time, a dozen. High, broken, echoing through the empty rides. It rolled over me, bouncing from stall to stall until it was impossible to tell where it came from. I spun in place, flashlight cutting across empty space, but I already knew. I wasn't alone out. There. Something was in those fairgrounds. With me, and it wasn't playing. I thought the laughter was bad enough. I thought hearing those voices echo through the empty fairground would be the part that stuck with me. But I was wrong. It wasn't the sound that stayed with me. It was what I saw after. By the time backup rolled in, 2 deputies in separate cruisers, I was standing at the center of the midway, sweating through my uniform even though the night was cold. I couldn't explain what I'd heard without sounding crazy, so I kept it simple. Trespassers, probably kids, lots of footprints, some weird damage to the property. I didn't mention the voices. We split up, flashlights cutting wide arcs across the abandoned grounds. Every step crunched against gravel and broken glass. The old rides towered above us, skeletal, their shadows twisting across the dirt. And then I noticed something. The shadows weren't moving right. At first, I thought it was just my light playing tricks. The beams bounced, stretched, warped on the cracked pavement. But the more I watched, the more I realized the angles didn't line up. I'd turned my wrist one way and my shadow should have leaned left, but instead, it leaned right. The deputies' silhouettes stretched in directions that didn't match their bodies. And then there was the other problem. There were more shadows than there should have been. I caught it by accident. My light swept across the game booths, and for a split second, I counted 3 figures standing behind me. But when I turned around, only 2 deputies were there. The third shadow stayed. It didn't vanish. Didn't snap back to the ground like some mistake. It lingered on the booth wall, tall and human-shaped, just standing still. I froze. Breath caught in my throat. One of the deputies called out, "Sheriff?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't take my eyes off that shape, because the longer I stared, the clearer it became. It wasn't a trick of light. It wasn't ours, it was someone else's shadow. I stepped closer. The figure stayed flat against the wood, shoulders sloping, head cocked at an angle like it was listening. But there was nothing casting it. No body, no person, just the shape, waiting in the glow of our flashlights. The deputy beside me whispered, "You seeing that?" Before I could answer, the shadow moved. It slid across the booth wall, smooth as spilled ink, stretching long before snapping into place against another stall. No sound, no hesitation. The other deputy swore under his breath, raising his light. That only made it worse. Because when the beam cut across the midway, more of them appeared. Dozens. Figures stretching across the walls, the ground, the broken rides. Men, women, children. Shapes with no bodies, no faces, just black silhouettes standing where no one should be. Some were frozen in place. Others twitched, jerking in broken movements like puppets with cut strings. One leaned forward as if pressing against the thin layer of wood and glass that held it back. The laughter rose again, spilling from every corner of the fairground. Not just children now, deeper tones, harsher voices, a chorus of mockery. My deputies shouted, flashlights whipping back and forth, guns half drawn, though I doubt any of us believed they'd help. "Back to the gate!" I barked. My voice shook, but it was the only order I could manage. We started moving fast, cutting across the midway. Our boots thundered against the cracked pavement. The shadows followed. They peeled from the walls, sliding across the ground like liquid tar. Each time our lights hit them, more appeared, stretching long across the dirt, slipping closer, reaching. One brushed against my boot. I swear to God I felt it. Cold and sharp, like dipping your foot into ice water. I stumbled, cursing, and the thing snapped back flat against the ground. We made it to the Ferris wheel before one of the deputies stopped short. He was staring at the base of the ride, where the shadow of a man stood perfectly upright. Not moving, not distorted, just standing there. It looked normal at first glance. But then I noticed the head. It was wrong. Too long, the neck stretched out, tilting sharp like a broken doll. Its arms dangled down to its knees, fingers pointed like claws. The deputy whispered, "That's not ours." The shadow turned. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. It rotated its head toward us, though there was no face to see. And then it stepped forward. Not the body. Just the shadow. It tore itself from the Ferris wheel and bled across the dirt, stretching thin before snapping upright again. Closer now. The air around us went heavy, like the whole fairground was sucking in a breath. I fired. I didn't think. I just raised my gun and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the empty stalls. The bullet punched into the Ferris wheel frame, sparks flying. The shadow didn't flinch. It slid again. Closer. That broke us. We bolted. All three of us sprinting down the midway, lights bouncing wildly. The shadows swarmed the walls around us, sliding along like they were hurting us, laughing with voices that didn't sound human anymore. By the time we hit the broken gates, my lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead. But I didn't stop until I was through. The second we crossed the fence line, the sound cut off. No laughter. No movement. I turned, chest heaving, flashlight trembling in my grip. The fairground stood quiet, empty, but the shadows were still there. I could see them, clustered just beyond the gate. Dozens of black shapes clinging to the stalls, the rides, the broken booths. None of them crossed the line. They just stood and watched. And when my light caught their faces, if you can call them that, I swore they were smiling. When the call came in, it sounded simple. A neighbor said they'd seen lights in the old farmhouse off County Road 12. That place had been empty for years. Roof half caved, fields grown over, porch slanting like it was tired of holding itself up. People went out there sometimes. Teenagers looking for a dare, drifters needing a place to sleep. Squatters weren't unusual, but it was near midnight and the voice on the phone had a weight to it. Like the caller wasn't just reporting trespassers. Like they wanted to get the words out fast before they changed their mind. I drove out with one deputy. The road was gravel and full of ruts, lined with trees that looked black against the sky. My headlights cut across weeds taller than the fence posts, and then the house came into view. I remember the first thing I thought. It looked wrong even from a distance. Like it hadn't just been abandoned, it had been left behind. The windows were dark, but the front door hung wide open. The porch sagged, boards missing, and weeds had crawled right up the steps. We parked out front, killed the engine. For a long moment, neither of us got out. The house just sat there, waiting. Finally, I opened my door. My boots sank into soft earth, damp and cold. The air smelled like mold and something sharp like old metal. We went up slow. Flashlights cut across peeling paint, broken shutters. The door yawning wide like a mouth that didn't care to shut. Inside, it was worse. The air was heavy, thick with dust and rot. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling down like old skin. The floor groaned under every step. But what I noticed most was the silence. Not just quiet, silence. No insects. No wind slipping through cracks. Not even the sound of the house settling. It was the kind of silence that pressed in, so full it almost rang in your ears. We called out, "Sheriff's office. Anybody here?" Our voices sounded flat, like the walls swallowed them. Nothing answered. We moved room by room. The front parlor was empty except for a collapsed sofa, stuffing spilling out like entrails. The kitchen held a broken table, a rusted sink, cabinets hanging open, no bags, no food wrappers, no sleeping gear. Still, the air felt used. Like someone had been in there not long before us. We went upstairs next. The staircase leaned under our weight, wood soft with years of damp. At the top, the hallway stretched narrow and dark, doors sagging on their hinges. I shone my light across the floor. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare, faint, pressed into the dust. They trailed from one end of the hall to the other. I counted at least 3 sets. Different sizes. The deputy whispered, "Guess the neighbor wasn't lying." We followed the prints. First bedroom, empty, just a frame of a bed and a broken dresser. Second, nothing but torn curtains and a pile of plaster in the corner. Then we reached the last room. The door was closed. Every other door in that house had been wide open, hinges loose, wood swollen. But this one was shut tight. The prince led right up to it. "Stop there." I raised my hand, knocked once. "Sheriff's office." "Open up." Silence. I tried the knob. It turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Something blocked it from the other side. I pushed harder. The wood shuddered, groaned. My deputy leaned in with me. Together we forced it just enough to see inside, and that's when the smell hit us. Not rot, not mold. Something stranger, sour, metallic, like wet pennies mixed with damp earth. We shoved the door wider and stepped in. The room was empty. No squatters. No bags, no signs of anyone living there. Just bare walls, a cracked ceiling, and a floor littered with dust and splinters. But the footprints were there too. Fresh, scattered across the boards, and they didn't lead out. They stopped in the middle of the room, like whoever made them had just stood there, and then vanished. My deputy swore under his breath. I didn't answer. I just kept my light steady on that patch of floor, like if I stared long enough, the answer might show itself. But nothing moved. Nothing explained it. Finally, I said, "Let's clear the rest." We went back downstairs, every step slower now. The silence felt heavier. The air felt colder. When we reached the front door, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The prints weren't just upstairs anymore. They were on the walls, bare feet. Dozens of them. Imprints pressed into peeling wallpaper, trailing along the hall like people had walked sideways, upside down, without bothering to use the floor. Some prints overlapped. Some twisted at impossible angles. "All of them fresh," the deputy whispered. "This isn't..." Then he stopped. Because we both heard it. Movement not upstairs this time. Not behind us. From deeper in the house. Soft, slow steps. Bare feet on wood, coming closer. I called out again, voice cracking sharper than I meant. "Sheriff's office!" "Show yourself." The steps stopped. We waited. My heart thudded so hard it hurt. The beam of my flashlight shook against the wall. Then the silence closed in again. We didn't wait any longer. We backed out the front door, down the porch, across the yard until we were standing by the cruiser. From there, we watched the house. It sat still, broken windows glinting in the moonlight. The open door swayed once in the wind that had finally returned. No one came out. But in the glow of our headlights, I swore I saw something on the glass upstairs, not a person. Not a clear figure, just the shape of a hand, flat against the window, and then it was gone. We searched that place twice more in the following days. Found nothing. No squatters, no gear. No signs anyone had stayed there, but the footprints never faded. Every time we went back, they were waiting. On the floors, on the walls, on the ceiling. Like the house wasn't empty. Like it was holding on to something, and maybe, just maybe, that something wasn't supposed to leave. Told myself I wouldn't go back, but I did. It was 3 nights. Later, when another call came in. Same house. Same neighbor. Said they saw movement again, this time flickering lights behind the broken windows. The deputy from before refused to return. Said he wasn't stepping foot in that place again. I didn't argue. Deep down, I didn't want to go back either. But someone had to. So I went alone. By the time I pulled up, the night had already closed in heavy and still. The farmhouse loomed out of the dark, its roofline sharp against a sliver of moon. The porch leaned even more than before, like it might finally give in. The front door was still hanging open. I left the engine running, headlights cutting across the weeds. My hand rested on the radio the whole time I walked up the path, but I didn't call it in. Some part of me didn't want anyone else to hear what I might find. Inside, the air hit me the same way it had before. Thick, damp, sour with that metallic tang. My boots sank into the same dust. My flashlight beam landed on the same peeling wallpaper, the same warped floorboards, but this time, there was something different. The silence was gone. I heard voices, low, muffled, like a family whispering behind a closed door. Too quiet to make out words, but enough to raise every hair on the back of my neck. I moved toward the sound. through the front parlor, through the kitchen, until I reached the dining room. That's where I found them. 4 people sitting around the table. At first glance, it looked like any normal family dinner. 2 adults, 2 children. The table was set with cracked plates and cloudy glasses. Silverware laid out neat and proper. But the food was all wrong. The plates were filled with dust. Dust shaped into the forms of bread, meat, and vegetables. Dust piled into bowls like mashed potatoes. Dust molded into a roast chicken sitting in the middle of the table, whole and untouched, and the family didn't move. They were dressed in clothes that looked 100 years old. Faded fabric, threadbare seams. The father in suspenders, the mother in a long dress. The children in plain shirts and patched trousers. Their heads were bowed. Hands rested on the table, fingers curled around the silverware like they had been about to eat. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. My light skimmed across their faces. That's when I realized they weren't statues. They weren't mannequins. They were people. Their skin was pale and thin, stretched tight, gray in the beam of my light. Their hair hung in brittle strands. Eyes closed, mouths slack, but they weren't skeletons. They weren't rotten. They looked preserved. Like the moment they sat down had been sealed in, untouched by time. The whispering grew louder. It wasn't coming from them, it was coming from the walls, from the ceiling. From the air itself, I forced myself to speak. My voice cracked, but I said it anyway. Sheriff's office. The words sounded pathetic in that room. None of them moved. I circled the table slow, every step echoing too loud. My light passed over the mother, the father, the children. Their chests didn't rise. Their hands didn't twitch. But when I looked away from one face and then back again, I could swear their heads had shifted, just slightly. Like they were following me. The whispering deepened, crawling inside my ears. I still couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was there, steady, repeating, almost like prayer. My mouth went dry. My hand hovered over my gun, though I knew it wouldn't matter. I leaned close to one of the children. A boy, maybe 8 years old. His face was smooth but lifeless, lips pressed together like he was holding something inside. I whispered, "Can you hear me?" For the first time, I wished I hadn't, because his lips twitched. Not much, just enough to part slightly, and from between his teeth, dust spilled out. A thin stream of it, sliding down his chin to the plate below. I staggered back, chair legs scraping against the floor as I bumped the table. The sound was like a trigger. All 4 heads lifted at once. Eyes still closed, mouths still shut, but their faces turned up toward me like flowers to the sun, and the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was worse than anything I'd heard in that house before. I backed away, step by step, flashlight shaking in my hand. My beam skimmed over the father, the mother, the children. None of them moved again. They just sat there, waiting. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. I reached the doorway, still staring at them, and for a moment I thought I saw something else. Shadows. Not theirs. Shadows standing behind each chair. Taller, darker, shaped like people but stretched too long, too thin. Their hands rested on the family's shoulders like puppeteers holding strings. Then I blinked, and they were gone. I forced myself through the kitchen, through the front hall, out the yawning door. My boots hit the porch hard, and I nearly fell down the steps. The cold night air felt like water filling my lungs. I staggered to the cruiser, hands trembling so bad I could barely work the door handle. I didn't look back at the house until I was inside with the engine roaring, and when I did, I saw the dining room window. The glass was smeared with dust from the inside, like someone had pressed their hand flat against it. The shape was there clear as day. Fingers spread wide, palm large, but it wasn't the hand of a man. It was too long, too thin, and it didn't leave. Even as I drove away, headlights bouncing off weeds and gravel, I kept my eyes on the mirror. That handprint stayed on the window, watching me shrink into the dark. I didn't report exactly what I saw. Just filed it as trespassers, house cleared, nothing further. But I can't stop thinking about them. That family, sitting frozen at their table. The way their heads rose when I spoke. And the dust, always the dust. Like something in that house is feeding them, or maybe feeding through them. Either way, I know this much. That family's still sitting there, waiting. And if anyone else walks in, I don't think they'll walk back out. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Even when I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that handprint. Too long, too thin, spread flat against the dining room glass like it belonged there. I'd wake with a jolt every time my mind replayed the moment the boy's lips opened and that dust spilled down his chin. I told myself it wasn't real. That I was tired. That I was working too many night shifts, too many calls that never ended well. But the truth kept gnawing at me. That family wasn't supposed to be there, and, worse, they weren't alive in the way you and I are. By the time the first light pushed through my blinds, I knew I had to see the house again. Not at night this time. Not under the weight of darkness. In daylight, maybe the whole place would look different. Maybe it would all make sense. So I drove out early, before breakfast, before coffee, just me and that stretch of back road cutting through the trees. When I came around the last bend, I braked so hard the cruiser skidded sideways on gravel. Because the house wasn't the same. Every window was sealed with fresh boards. The front door was covered too, hammered shut with new lumber. Even the porch posts had been reinforced. The place looked like it had been locked up for years, but I knew it hadn't. I'd been inside less than 12 hours ago. I sat there behind the wheel, staring at it with my jaw tight and my throat dry. That's when I saw the truck. An old pickup sat off to the side, parked crooked in the grass. A man stood by the bed, tossing tools back in. Hammer, crowbar, nails. He looked up when he noticed me, eyes narrowed against the sun. I rolled the window down. "Morning," he nodded. "Morning. You the one boarded this place?" I asked. "Yeah." He slapped dust from his hands, glanced at the house like it was something filthy. Wasn't easy either. "Damn thing doesn't like to stay shut." I frowned. "What do you mean by that?" He shrugged, but there was something stiff in his shoulders, like the question hit a nerve. "Neighbor called me early," he said. "Said she saw lights on in here last night. Screaming too. Asked if I'd take care of it." "Screaming?" I repeated. He nodded. "Said it's been happening for years. Kids messing around, I figured. But I've been patching this place up for decades, deputy. Decades. Every time it gets opened, every time someone breaks in, it don't take long before things start happening again." I didn't answer. My pulse was crawling slow and heavy. "How long's it been empty?" I asked finally. The man's lips twitched. 40 years. I shook my head. That can't be right. I stopped myself. My voice cracked. "I saw a family inside. Last night." His face went flat. "You didn't." "I did. 4 of them. Husband, wife, 2 kids. Sitting at the table like..." He cut me off sharp. "No one's lived here since '79. I stared at him, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept shoving tools into the truck bed, clattering steel against steel. "House belonged to the Rakers," he said after a beat. "Whole family up and died one winter. Just sat down for supper and never got back up. Nobody found him for weeks. My skin went cold." "Cause of death?" I asked. He shrugged. "No cause. Doctor couldn't find one. They weren't poisoned. They weren't sick. They were just gone." I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the dryness in my throat. "And the house?" He finally looked at me and his eyes were hard. "The house doesn't forget." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. He slammed the tailgate shut and climbed into his truck without another word. The engine rattled to life, coughing smoke. He pulled away slow, gravel crunching under his tires, and left me alone with the boarded-up farmhouse. I sat there for a long time. The morning sun lit the place in pale gold, but it didn't look warm. The boards across the windows seemed too new, too clean, like they'd been put there to hide a wound that was still bleeding underneath. I thought about the boy at the table, dust spilling from his mouth. I thought about the shadows behind the family, their long fingers resting on shoulders, and I thought about what the man had said. The house doesn't forget. I don't know what he meant, but I know this much. When I finally drove away, I felt like something was following. Not on the road, not in the trees. Inside me, like a whisper lodged under the skin, waiting for dark. Nights in this town were usually quiet, Too quiet, if you asked me. But quiet didn't bother me. Not the kind we normally got anyway. A drunk stumbling home, a dog barking at shadows, the hum of a lone streetlight with a moth stuck circling it. That was the rhythm of this place. And after enough years on patrol, I learned to live with it. But the night I'm about to tell you about, it was different. I started my shift at 11, grabbed a stale coffee from the diner, slid behind the wheel of the cruiser, and rolled down Main Street just like always. The roads looked slick, though there hadn't been any rain. The air tasted metallic, like pennies pressed against the tongue, and there wasn't a soul around. Now I don't mean it was slow. I mean there was no one. Not walking, not driving, not even leaning out for a smoke. The town felt hollow. I told myself it was nothing, just one of those nights when people decided to stay home. But as I drove, I noticed the windows, every house I passed, had faces in them. Not people exactly, just shapes pressed close to the glass, pale outlines, blurry as if fogged up from the inside. I slowed the cruiser near Johnson's place, a little blue house with wind chimes that always rattled too loud. Sure enough, something was there at the window, a tall figure, still as stone. I couldn't see eyes, couldn't make out details, just the outline of a body watching me roll by. And it wasn't just there. Every block I checked, every house I passed, something stood at the window, all of them silent, all of them staring. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing myself not to look too long. Radio static filled the car, low and uneven. I tried calling dispatch. "Unit 7 to base, come in." The static cracked, then settled. No answer. I tried again. Base copy? Nothing. Just the hiss of white noise like breath against my ear. I drove on, my heart knocking louder with every turn. Storefronts were dark. Street lamps flickered. And still, in every glass pane, in every reflection, figures. I stopped outside the hardware store. That's where I finally saw one move. The shadow behind the door tilted its head. Not much. Just a small, crooked lean like it was curious. Then it stepped back into the dark, melting away until the glass was empty again. My stomach dropped. This wasn't drunks or teenagers messing around. This wasn't anything I could explain. I thought about getting out of the cruiser, but the idea felt wrong. The street outside looked stretched somehow, like the distance between me and the curb was longer than it should have been, so I stayed in the car. I circled town twice. Same thing both times. Empty streets, silent houses, watching windows. By the third loop, I started to notice the faces weren't always in the same place. Some windows that had been empty were now filled. Some figures had shifted closer to the glass, and some looked like they were inside the cruiser's reflection. That was when I stopped breathing right. My chest felt tight, like something pressing down on it. I parked outside the school, cut the engine, and just listened. The silence wasn't pure anymore. Underneath it, there was a faint hum, not the hum of lights or wires. This was deeper, slower. A vibration I felt in my teeth more than I heard in my ears. I don't know how long I sat there before the first window lit up. It was the principal's office. A pale glow, soft like a lamp turning on. But there hadn't been power to that building for months. And in the glow, I swear I saw dozens of faces. Not kids, not adults. Something in between, blurred, all pressed to the glass at once. I started the cruiser again. Too fast. The tires screeched against asphalt, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. As I sped down the street, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror. The school windows were black again, but the figures weren't gone. They were closer, closer to me, watching. I drove until my knuckles went white on the wheel. I don't remember the turns, don't remember the streets. Just the blur of buildings sliding by, all lined with staring shapes. When I finally pulled up to the station, the lot was empty. Not a single car. Inside, the lights were off. Discs by, radios cold, but every window of the station had faces. They weren't supposed to be there. I never made it past the front steps. Something in me wouldn't let me. I just stood there under the street lamp, staring back at all those empty windows filled with something that wasn't alive but knew I was. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe an hour, maybe the whole night. But when dawn finally broke, the figures were gone. The town looked normal again. People came out of their houses like nothing had happened. Cars started moving. Kids on bikes. The world carried on, but I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I drive past a house at night, I catch myself glancing at the windows, because I know they're still there, waiting for me to patrol again. I thought writing it down would help. That's what we're trained to do. Make it official. Get it on paper. Reports keep the world clean, orderly. A chain of facts, time-stamped and filed like the truth itself, could be locked away in a cabinet. But now I think the report is the trap, because I've been writing for hours. Maybe days, maybe longer, and I'm still on the same night. It started simple enough. I sat down at my desk, still shaken from what I'd seen out there on patrol. The town quiet, the streets empty, the figures in the windows that shouldn't have been there. I opened the logbook, dated the entry, and began. Patrol began at 2300 hours, and then something strange happened. The pen wouldn't stop moving. At first I thought it was just the adrenaline, my hands spilling words before my brain caught up. But the further I went, the heavier it felt, like the report was pulling the memory straight out of me. Every sound, every thought, every second of that night spilling onto the page whether I wanted it to or not. I tried to stop. I even dropped the pen once, shoved the paper aside. But when I looked back, the words had continued on their own. Perfect handwriting. My handwriting, I'm not exaggerating. I swear it. The lines filled themselves neat as typewritten text, recounting everything exactly as it happened. And when I read them, it wasn't just the memory. It was like living it again. Every detail pulled me deeper. The metallic taste of the air, the low hum in my teeth, the faces in the glass leaning just a little too close. I felt them all over again, stronger, sharper. And when I blinked, I wasn't at the desk anymore. I was back in the cruiser. The road stretched ahead, black and empty. The figures in the windows watching me glide past. My hands on the wheel, knuckles white. I told myself it was just exhaustion. I'd fallen asleep at the desk, dreaming with my eyes open. But then I woke, or I thought I did. And the report was still there, still unfinished. I was back at the desk, pen in hand. Pages filled with my handwriting, and the last line written was, I told myself it was just exhaustion. I'd fallen asleep at the desk, word for word, like the report was reading my thoughts in real time. I froze. I didn't want to write anymore, didn't want to feed it. But the silence of the station pressed down on me, thick and endless, until finally I picked the pen back up, and the cycle began again. Patrol, windows, watching. Each time the memory grew heavier, the figures clearer. One night, if you can still call it night, I saw them moving. Not just pressing against the glass, but slipping out of it. Shadows stepping free like smoke curling from a flame, and the report wrote it down. Even when I didn't want it to. The more I resist, the worse it gets. When I try to close my eyes, I hear the scratching of the pen on paper anyway. When I try to leave the station, the door only opens back into this same room, this same desk, this same half-finished report waiting for me. And the report keeps changing. Sometimes when I read back, I see words I don't remember writing. Sentences that don't sound like me at all, like, the town is hollow. The town is only glass. The town is watching. Or, he doesn't understand yet that he is not outside. He is inside. Inside what? I don't know anymore, but the worst part isn't the words. It's the signatures. Every page. At the bottom, there's a name. Not mine. Names of deputies who came before me. Deputies who should have been long gone. Deputies I only know from faded photos in the hallway, faces in black and white, and all their reports. And the same way. This is my last patrol. I don't know how many pages I've written now. The stack on the desk is taller than it should be. Too thick for one night's work, and yet every time I blink, another sheet appears. Fresh ink. Fresh memory. It's like I'm stuck in a loop, circling those streets forever. And the town is getting emptier each time. The last round I wrote, there weren't even shadows in the windows anymore. Just blank glass staring back at me. But I still felt the eyes. Not from the houses. From the pages, like the words themselves were watching. I wonder how many others sat here before me. How many tried to file their final night into neat little lines, only to realize the lines never end. Maybe that's the trick. The report doesn't finish because the patrol never finishes. Or maybe the patrol never finishes because the report won't let it. I can't tell which came first anymore. My hand is tired. My fingers ache. But I know the second I stop writing, the silence will start pressing in again. The kind that hums in your teeth. The kind that means something's just outside the glass, waiting for me to notice. So I'll keep going. I'll keep writing because if I stop, I think the report will finish itself. And when it does, maybe I won't be here at all. Maybe I'll just be another name at the bottom of the page,